Hi there, Amanda Ludwig, Increase Expert. Just a couple of updates for small business with what is happening with federal funding. There does seem to be quite a bit of movement over the last week. The news in the White House seems to be pushing some things through and giving some additional incentives for decisions to be made. So that's great for small business. The way that the bill, which I have not read in its entirety, and it's 2,000 plus pages, but a few highlights from it, does seem to include some additional PPP funding. And by additional, I mean also eligible for people who had applied in the first round. So that's wonderful news. However, it does seem like the requirements are going to be quite a bit more specific than they were the first time around. Not necessarily for the use of funds, that seemed to be loosening up, but the requirements to be able to obtain the funds seem to be a little bit tighter if everything goes through as written. The other good news is that there's going to be additional EIDL funding available. Now that funding, as you know, the $10,000 grant that came along with the loan, those funds were completely depleted and loans have been still given out, but no grants. The grant portion, the $10,000 or up to $10,000 grants, seem to be back on the table. And so, of course, if that goes through, will be wonderful news. What I haven't been able to find in certainty is whether or not those who did not get the $10,000 grants initially will be issued those funds retroactively. I personally spoke to an agent with the SBA who assured me that if that sort of pocket of money were to be re-upped, that they would be retroactively paying those folks who did not get any grant funding at all. However, I have not been able to find that that is in fact written into the bill, or whether or not that's going to be how it's issued is still a little bit up in the air, in my opinion. So if you find that, please let me know. So good news may be ahead. If there's anything that we've learned through this process, it's not to speculate, but rather wait until not only laws are passed, but also the guidelines are issued, that because they don't always seem to be aligned, as we learned from some of the changes that the SBA made on the original stimulus package. So good news though, it seems to be on those fronts, and when those things happen, we will certainly post that on our Facebook page, and those of you who subscribe to our e-newsletters will make sure those announcements go out. Also important is PPP Forgiveness. So we've been getting a lot of questions from those people who we prepared your PPP application. And what we are getting back from banks is basically a hurry up and wait. And rightly so, they are not interested in processing forgiveness applications that are unnecessary. So what we've seen from banks either via individual correspondence or actual announcements to their customers have been to, if you are under a certain threshold, they're saying absolutely do not apply for forgiveness yet. One, because if this bill goes through where you can get additional PPP funding, there's a little confusion about the language. In some places we're seeing they're talking about it as additional funding, as in re-upping the loan you already have. And in other conversations, it seems to be more talking about a second loan. And so banks not being certain of that, they're saying, well, if it's to up the one that you already have with us, we don't want to forgive that loan and close it out if you're eligible to add to it. So that's a really big piece as far as banks are concerned, and waiting, that's something that they've communicated with us. The other part is some chatter about possible automatic forgiveness. And again, banks have no interest in processing applications that are unnecessary. So if the automatic forgiveness for PPP loans is something that happens, that is why, of course, banks have huge incentives for having their customers wait. We have seen a couple of things in the last week from banks, one of which was for those loans that were over the threshold. They were contacting their customers and saying, we will invite you individually if your loan was over the threshold for the proposed automatic forgiveness. So some of that is starting to roll through. We have had some clients who are already in the process of the forgiveness. And the other thing we've seen is banks sending out an email saying, we are pushing back the date of your first payment, because keep in mind, PPP, your first payment was due in 6 weeks. Just kidding, 6 months. So thank goodness, not 6 weeks. So if your loan was due in 6 months, those folks, you know, your first payment was due, those folks who applied in April, we're now looking at payments due. And so we are seeing banks who are communicating with their customers that they have the discretion to do that. They are pushing that back again in an effort to not process forgiveness applications that are unnecessary. So those are our main updates. Please be sure, if you are not following us on Facebook, we are posting more of the kind of up to the minute updates, as more so on some of the state funding, local city municipality funding, those types of things, those quick updates. We are adding those to our Facebook page. So make sure you're following us there, as well as if you have not subscribed to our e-newsletter. Those people who we prepared your applications for individually, we will contact you individually as your bank communicates with us about forgiveness for PPP. And certainly if they communicate with you, be sure to send that our way. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll have good news for you soon.